It is. That's part of the what do you call this? The internet streaming era.
Live broadcast.
It is, and that's okay because it's not going to interfere with the show today. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about. I think I want to address first of all the meltdown that we're still witnessing from our Democrat friends across the aisle. It's been 2 weeks. It's the end of the world as they know it. Every commentator, every talking head trying to figure out what went wrong. And somewhere along the way, there's all this finger pointing. The circular firing squad has been created among the Democrats, and that's something I like to see. But I have a theory about that. We're going to talk about it in a second. I think the reason they're so upset is because they were misled.
I think that's accurate.
Not by us.
Yeah.
By their media establishment, by their friends in the media. They're like children who did not recognize or understand that there was bad news around the corner. They were protected, they were coddled.
Yeah.
And when the bad news hit, they just don't quite know how to look at reality after that. Something else I want to talk about as well, hero worship. And what does that mean in the context of conservative thought? I know, there's nothing wrong with heroes. There's nothing wrong with role models. I didn't say that, I said hero worship. There's a big difference. Conservatism especially is offended by hero worship of powerful politicians. And I'm not simply talking about Trump. Simmer down. We'll get to that here in a second. I want to talk about the Department of Governmental Efficiency at some point today. New department. It's not going to be in the government. It's going to be like outside the government. But it just so happens to be headed by the world's richest man. So it might as well be part of the government. They're going to do their best to carve down the size and scope of the federal government. I'm looking forward to talking about that and talking about some of the wasteful programs that exist out there that might need to be cut, but also the difficulties ahead as to whether or not it can actually be done, or even if it's going to be enough. And then lastly, at some point, I want to talk about Wyoming. You may say, why Wyoming? Say it, Jack. Why Wyoming?
Why Wyoming?
Isn't that weird?
It is weird.
I say that because in Wyoming, there's a judge now that's issued an opinion striking down some of the protections for the unborn. This judge, reading the Wisconsin state constitution, not the federal constitution, to come to the consensus or come to the light somehow that these new laws passed by the legislature are somehow offensive or in contrast to their constitution. We'll talk about that. But first things first, let's get right to the show today on the Midnight Ride, your home of the anti-establishment movement in this country. The Democrats, they're misled. They're so misled, and they have been for years. Think about the news cycles we've all witnessed, not just in this election, but every election since we've been alive. You could probably go all the way back to Goldwater. Now, I wasn't alive during Goldwater. Jack was probably alive. It was in 1964. Goldwater's running against Johnson, and the entire press mechanism, the entire establishment, pointed their guns at Barry Goldwater. And when they did, they made him sound like a lunatic. Now, Barry Goldwater wasn't saying anything that the Founding Fathers wouldn't have said. He was a patriot. He was a man of conviction. He was speaking truth to a country that needed to hear his truth. That was in 1964. And if Goldwater doesn't make those statements, we probably don't have Ronald Reagan in 1980. So Goldwater is a pivotal person in the conservative movement. The press, they destroyed him. I think he won 5 states, in large part because people feared him. The press did that. Rock along, I don't have to stop there. Nixon, the press destroyed him. Keep moving. Reagan, the press tried to destroy him. They called Ronald Reagan everything under the sun. Okay, let's think through this. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't think of a Republican presidential candidate, even the milquetoast ones, even the ones that weren't very conservative, that the press did not try in some form or fashion to defeat prior to the election. Even Mitt Romney. You know, you think about it, if the press has a Republican darling, it's Mitt Romney, and yet they did everything in their power to destroy Mitt Romney. He had one misstatement, I remember, during the campaign that was caught by a little handheld camera at one of his events, and the press magnified that to make it sound like he was going to destroy the entire country if he was elected. Yeah. And this is their darling. So let's get things straight for a second. When the press looks at an election, they come into the fight, come into the election with a preordained set kind of rules. And those rules are this: defeat the Republican candidate. No matter
Period.
what.
Yeah.
Defeat him. You do that one of a couple of ways. First of all, you villainize the Republican. But then you find ways to uplift the Democrat. Let's not kid ourselves. To the American press, Barack Obama was the second coming, was he not?
Absolutely.
The greatest orator of our time, a generational talent, blah, 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 blah. It was the same old stuff. But even the first time we saw him speak at the convention, when he was not even a U.S. senator at the stage, the press propped him up. And they do that. You see, the press comes into every fight with bias, with prejudice. And they do it, strangely enough, under the guise that they're going to be fair. We haven't had a fair press, not a mainstream press, as long as I've been alive. Don't kid yourselves.
No,
it hasn't
we
happened. And the problem is that for the first time ever, well, I'll back up. The problem is that up to now, there weren't any tools to combat their shenanigans. We have those tools now. X used to be Twitter, even Facebook. These are tools used by conservatives, Telegram and others, Truth Social, tools used by conservatives to kind of offset the bias that we see in the press. They can't stand it. It drives them crazy. And the instant they get called out as being disingenuous or somehow fake or somehow biased, they get even more angry. So they're basically walking into their own trap they set for themselves. So here's my analysis of the election from 14 days ago. The liberals in this country, the Democrats in this country, wouldn't be so upset simply with a Trump loss had they anticipated it was even possible. They didn't think it was possible. They were the Super Bowl reigning champions. They were a 2-touchdown favorite. The odds on she was going to win the race. Now, why did they feel that way? They felt that way because the press propped up Miss Harris, made her seem like a transformative candidate. She was out for the common man. She was going to change the way things were done. She was going to create this new opportunity economy. You've heard all the statements, right? And then on the other side of the equation, when they're lifting her up, they're doing everything in their power to cut down Donald Trump. You think about the buzzwords there. Nazi, dangerous to democracy, a threat to the American way of life. If he's elected, he's going to lock people up. If he's elected, he's going to deport people on the spot, even people that just happen to speak their minds against him. And so they hear this for all these weeks, and they begin to believe it. And so they believe Trump is an existential threat to democracy, and they believe Harris is the only one that can stop him. But perhaps more importantly, as to their disappointment, they just knew they were right. And here's why they know they're right, or they thought they were right. First, the press is feeding it to them. But they're also caught in a bubble. The Democrats, even more so than us, they're caught in a really strange bubble. And here's why. They feel like they're elite. And when you get to the point where you feel like you're elite, you simply will not listen to dissenting opinion. Why? Why would you? You're better than that. You're smarter than that. You know more than that. Why would I listen to dissenting opinion? Why would I listen to anyone disagreeing with me when I'm clearly the brightest and the best? And so they get in these coffee shops. Let's not kid ourselves. And I love coffee shops too. Something hip about them. But I sometimes think I'm the only Republican in the room when I walk in one.
You probably are.
Probably are. So they get into these coffee shops and they speak to each other. And the conversation goes something like this. Can you believe those rednecks like Donald Trump? He's going to destroy this country, and they're voting against themselves. How dare they? Do you know why they're doing it? They're just not very smart. And so they come to those conclusions in these tiny rooms, speaking to each other in their small parts of the web, speaking to each other. Whether the rooms are coffee shops or chat rooms or even social media platforms, just always talking to each other. The algorithm does that. It force feeds us things we want to see. And so to them, they're caught up in this space. And in that space, they hate Trump dearly. They think he's a threat. They believe it sincerely. I don't discount their belief systems from that perspective. They believe it.
Yeah. But
the press doubled down. He's not just terrible. She's not just wonderful. But the polls show her leading.
I remember.
Remember? Not just leading here and there, even in Iowa. There was a pollster in all places, Iowa, where Trump ends up getting about 57% of the vote.
Yeah, on election day, no less, or the day before.
That announces that even in Iowa, which is typically a place where Trump had absolutely no chance to win, that he was behind this transformative Miss Harris in Iowa. So they get caught up in their own machine. And they hear these lies, and the press, all the more willing, I suppose, to keep lying because they keep getting views, they create a new reality. But the reality wasn't real, was it?
Not at all. It was an illusion.
And that's why they're so upset. And it wasn't just with Miss Harris either. Every time I watch Tim Walz, and I'm sure Tim Walz has some qualities. I don't know what they are, but I'm sure he has qualities. But every time I watched him personally, I tried to recognize how, who is this person and how could he possibly have been elected to be a governor of a state? And who is this person? And I keep hearing all these positive things about him, but when he speaks, he creeps me out.
He's weird.
He's strange.
It's funny that he's the guy that used to call people weird, but he's weird.
Well, he lacked political ability.
Yeah.
Let's not kid ourselves. So how did he get from point A to point B? I have no idea. But he lacks a certain degree of political ability. Even I've seen losing candidates for years that have tremendous political ability. It's just so happens. I mean, the guy that ran against Ted Cruz in Texas this time, he had tremendous political ability. We may not like him, but Beto, that ran against Cruz and ran for president a few years ago, he had tremendous political ability. He could stand up on a table and just give this speech, and it looked good. Walz had none of that. But the press worked to prop him up. Prop him up. He was the guy, Midwestern values. He's a coach, for goodness sakes. How can you be against a coach? And so, again, they create this illusion of success. And then wouldn't you know, after all of that, after they convinced the voters that Trump was bad and that the Democrats were going to win, and then the results come in, and they were all wrong. It's not the first time they've been wrong.
Not at all.
But it's now having an effect. Because you can be wrong, and they've been wrong a lot, but then you can be really wrong at the right moment in time and cause a complete loss of trust in the institution. And here we are. If you look now at polling, if you ask people, do you trust the legacy press? Do you trust the mainstream press? The answer is no. In fact, their numbers have fallen to historically low numbers. If you think about it rationally, it's probably right there. I guess COVID and the press are trusted about as much. The COVID virus and the press. Does that make sense, Shane?
It does.
Now, with that said, here's what's happening. A transformation of their own doing. It wasn't just the Democrats got really, really upset. It's just now they're shaking their heads and they don't believe the press. You see, we've never believed the press. Not for a second. But now all of a sudden it's dawning on them. They were lied to during this whole situation. And then it leads to my next story of the day. When you lie to people after all these years, even the folks you claim you love, you lose credibility. And when you lose credibility, you lose money. And when you lose money, you have to lay people off. Mm-hmm. Big reports all this week about the Associated Press, one of the biggest news organizations in the world, cutting their staff by 8% across the board, redesigning the way they are delivering news and recognizing they're bleeding money. Why are they bleeding money? Because no one trusts the Associated Press. Why are they bleeding money? Because just like in Mississippi when I've run, their stories are so twisted and biased, so it's not to even be credible. At some point, people finally see through that. You can attack me and get away with it from time to time. When you do it on a national scale, though, it becomes twisted. And the writers here at the AP in Mississippi are no different. No. They had an agenda, and everything was a twist. Everything was a turn. They're paying the price now, and I'm happy to see it. So here we are with the AP bleeding. They're done. And they're going to keep bleeding. It's not like they're going to discover credibility again next year. That ship has sailed. You've said so many things. You behaved in such unruly and silly ways. Nobody's ever coming back to mainstream press again. And I think they're finally figuring that out. Their only recourse, I suppose, is to point to X and say, that's disinformation.
That's what they do.
They've been doing disinformation for the last 45 years. That's all they know. And so here we are. AP, draining, going down the web, going down the hole, so to speak. The News Media Guild, they represent writers and photographers. They're being offered, some of those are being offered buyouts now. These are old school writers and photographers that have been doing this for years. 121 of them being offered buyouts. You got to go somewhere else. We can't afford you anymore. Why can't we afford you? Nobody trusts us, so nobody's buying our junk anymore. It's about time. If there's going to be a revolution in this country, let it start with the press. Let it start with the press.
Well, Chris, I think that you're onto something here because, again, everybody has lost faith in the media. And I think it's very telling, too, because when you go back and you listen to the way some of these so-called journalists are talking now after the fact. I mean, I think it was Katie Couric who just came out this week talking about how Miss Harris wouldn't answer questions and that she was a bad candidate because she refused to answer the tough questions that she asked her. She didn't say that once when she was interviewing her. She didn't say that once during the election. This goes to what you're talking about. They're trying to win back that trust.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to work.
It's not going to happen. You not only have lost the trust entirely with roughly about 53 to 54% of the population, you now have undermined the trust that you once had in that segment that shared your viewpoints. No one believes a thing the AP says. No one believes a thing the legacy media says. I read the Wall Street Journal, and it's not quite as bad as the New York Times, but I read the Times daily. And it's not because I trust them. It's because I want to know exactly what the other side's game plan is. Mm-hmm. Now, that said, Chris Matthews is trying to do a bit of, analysis on what occurred. So he goes to MSNBC and he talks to Morning Joe. And, of course, the Morning Joe crew, I'm not sure what they believe. I don't know if they're just contrarians or if they're true Democrats or whatever the case may be. But, Scarborough has a career in Congress where he was a fairly conservative vote. Yeah. And it's kind of like he said, you know what, forget that. If I can make some money on a network, I'll change my viewpoints for a little bit of cash, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, more on that later. Matthews goes on to the show and he's trying to understand, or at least help them understand what could have happened or what could have occurred. Wouldn't you know, there it is. For a party that prided itself on being kid geniuses regarding how voters think, they dropped the ball. Another sign that its consultant class is too elite, overeducated, and incapable of taking accountability. And then what he did, he pointed straight to the reasons. The reasons for that loss are simple, and we said it on this show. And it's not that we're geniuses or some sort of brilliant predictors of the political landscape. We said stop talking about weather control and talk about immigration and the economy and public safety. That's what we said.
Yep.
And guess why we won? Immigration, economy, and public safety. Carville the other day ranted on the fact that the Democrats just didn't even discuss safety. Nope. And then Chris Matthews says, the other spokesperson for the party, he goes, look, it comes down to a couple of things, the border crisis and the economy. He said even Hispanics want the border closed, right? He says, that's why you lost them. That's why the party lost them. They want the border closed. They want law and order. Something else he said on the economy, stop all the spending. It's driving up the cost because of inflation. Yeah. You and I talked about that a dozen times on this show.
Yep.
Thank God the Democrats are too obtuse or too caught or stuck in their ways to have recognized those things, because had Harris pivoted and talked about immigration, how she was going to take care of the border, and talked about cutting spending to control inflation, they might have been successful. But they can't get away from that talk, a small little group in the coffee shop where they're constantly talking about identity politics, race, transgender issues, right? All that junk they talk about. That's what tanked them. At least now they're recognizing that, but they won't change a thing.
No, they'll double down.
They'll go through a year of this where they decide maybe we should have moved to the center, and then the loud part of their party, that base of screaming young'uns out there, you know who I'm talking about. Yeah. They'll find a way to redirect the party back toward hard leftist policies. But it's not even the traditional hard leftist policies. 30 years ago, we had liberals. 30 years ago, we had socialists, but nobody was talking about men in women's restrooms.
It's insane, Chris. And to your point about the fact that they're not going to let go of those issues, the what's her name? The former White House press secretary, the one that has the bad show on MSNBC.
Was it Psaki?
I think so.
Yeah, Jen Psaki.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, she was on there the other day talking about how all this talk about men in women's sports.
We're going to get to that. I don't want to get to that just yet. We'll talk about that. Now, you're transitioning a bit too fast because that is a story we have to talk about, but later, because it's just so silly.
Yeah.
Anyway, I love it when you transition from 30% of the show to the last story of the show. Anyway,
I try to be helpful.
Making it hard on me over here. But the point of all this is that I don't think you're going to see real direction change with the party, not Democrats.
No.
But at least give them some credit. They are people of conviction. And, to that extent, we may can learn some valuable lessons, because if we had the same conviction they did, we would probably dominate.
I think
American
that's where
politics.
a lot of our frustration comes in, Chris, is the fact that we, as much as we think some of their ideas are insane, we're jealous of the fact that they actually have fighters who will fight for those insane ideas, yet we don't have conservative champions who will actually fight for the conservative ideas and the conservative values that we think they should be. Or in the case of this election, they have a mandate to do.
Well, we're never going to see honesty and truth from institutions that are controlled by humans. And that's true for both sides to a certain extent. But at least if you're a press organization that claims it values truth, just report the news. Is that too hard? Just to report it without a slant or a spin or a twist or a turn. Trump said this, period. Not Trump said this, comma, meaning he's a Nazi. Just report the news. And we once had that in this country. But those days are long gone, and that's why nobody trusts the media. Now, with that said, the next thing I want to talk about tonight, this is going to take off everybody in the entire world. Because everybody's going to misinterpret it. Because no one listens anymore.
No, they don't. They hear what they want.
No one listens anymore. No one is thinking critically anymore. Now, I have an opinion, and it's subjective, certainly, but it's rational and it's critical in the sense that I've thought through it. I'm not just saying these things out of the blue. And what I want to talk about is whether or not hero worship of politicians could be counterintuitive to the conservative movement.
I think it is.
Could it harm it?
Yes.
Could it ultimately destroy it?
100%.
And before you go crazy, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'll get to it in a second. Hero worship. The founders of this country, in their genius, created a system where no one man or no group of men could exercise perfect authority. They did that because they had seen a king and they had studied kings and monarchs, and they knew how dangerous kings and monarchs could be. I mean, after all, it's throughout history where power is consolidated, it's always abused. Always. You can think of a single moment in history, with the exception perhaps maybe of George Washington, and that is somewhat debatable, but he relinquished power. Think about it. He didn't have to. They were actually trying to prop him up to be the president forever and ever, amen. He relinquished power. That's a really special anomaly, a really special man. Most men, given power, crave more power. Most men, given power, want to control things around them. And governments have shown us this since the dawn of governments. That's why I don't trust governments. Why? Because I know who they are. I know what they're about. There's always some knucklehead that only entered government so he could control the surroundings and the lives of other people. I think the entire Democrat Party is predicated on that concept right there. What you drink, what you eat, how you spend your money, the words you say out of your mouth, all about control. But we're all guilty of it to a certain extent, and that's why government has to be limited. So the feds, back in the day, the first feds, they created a government divided, different branches, right? Different, not only a horizontal separation of powers, but a vertical separation of powers between the states and the federal government. And there's a tension between all of that to create a situation where government can never get too big, too strong, or too controlling. The whole point was to make sure your rights were protected. That was it. They were scared of big government because they knew government's like a fire. It can keep you warm at night, but if it loses control, it can burn everything down and destroy you. So control it. Keep it controlled in that fireplace. We haven't done a good job of that.
No.
Not at all. A core cornerstone of that was to make sure that even though we may love a politician, admire a politician, you can't give a politician a pass without accountability. You have to hold them accountable. The reason for that is that our government is founded on self-rule, not on political rule. And the second you start giving politicians passes, they're no longer really accountable. And so they begin to rule notwithstanding the people. At that stage, the government's turned upside down. And that's kind of what we've been seeing, not with this election, but with other elections in the past, and a struggle for power where the government's turned upside down just for a while. Here's the thing. Conservatives should always be skeptical of any government.
100% agree.
Even the ones they control.
Yep.
Especially the ones they control. Because if we make bad policy while we control, we set bad precedent. And the next government, which may not be conservative at all, might take our weakness, our precedent, and use it against us to a certain extent. So we should always be skeptical. What happens, though, is when one of our people win, whether it's Reagan, Bush, Trump, whatever, we typically go back to sleep. We don't typically hold them accountable.
No.
And the problem there is that we look at these victories as somehow safeguards. But the victories aren't the safeguards. Only the people are the safeguards. And the only thing the people should be concerned about is making sure the government doesn't get too big, because every time it does, their rights are trampled, right?
Yep.
Here we are. You say, what is all this about? Well, let me tell you what it's about. I saw a post this morning from a guy named Eric Erickson. Do you know that name?
I do know that name.
This Eric is a great guy. He's a brilliant guy. Very Christian. Very Christian. You might remember back in the day, there was something called redstate.com.
Yep.
That's him. He was the guy that kind of put that on the map. And he would hold, what's the best way to put this? A convention of sorts of all these conservatives. And it was the best one out there. It was like CPAC before CPAC, right? It was a big, big deal. And he was, it popped in my newsfeed today. He was commenting about something. And Eric and I have been Facebook friends for some time. We've talked on the phone a few times. He was damaged considerably a few years ago when he was a never-Trumper. Mm-hmm. He's come around now, which is good. It's good now. But there was a time he was very much against Trump assuming the nomination for the party. And the Trump folks made him pay dearly. And it's really kind of hurt his brand. But now, great guy. I wish that wouldn't have happened. I wish folks would give him a second chance, because he's brilliant. He's a good Christian guy. Anyway, this post hit me like a ton of bricks this morning. And here's what we're going to do. I'm going to read this post. And these are not my words. These are his. Because I don't want you giving me bad emails like you always do. And then we'll take our commercial. And then we'll come back and talk about why it is this hero worship can be problematic as to Trump's cabinet. Eric Erickson to a poster. He says, guys, I'm not asking for much, but stop worshiping idols. That caught my attention like a ton of bricks. He's a good writer. Just because Robert Kennedy opposes red dye number 5 on your food or whatever, he is not one of the most moral people in D.C. Then I said, what on earth is this about? Who thinks Kennedy is one of the most moral people in D.C.? Certainly no one, right?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, come on, no one, right? But there was a poster. And sure enough, the poster, which in my mind, it was a contradictory post, because in one hand it said, he may not be a perfect man, but he's the most moral man in D.C. Now, I realize the standards in D.C. are really low.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make Kennedy a moral man because the standards are low. And then, I won't read all of this, but you can just imagine that Eric Erickson eviscerated Kennedy's character flaws. At least 37 affairs documented in a journal. That's a lot. It's not like Kennedy got drunk one night and made a mistake.
No, it's not a habitual mistake.
It's not like he fell in love accidentally or whatever the case may be. Things that happen. I don't know, but 37.
Yeah,
it's a pattern.
Yeah.
And all Eric was saying is, look, you may like him and all, but let's not call him moral. And what he was saying is, you're hero worshiping and you're ignoring the bigger picture here. And then he continued. I won't go into all the things he said because I don't think it's necessary. And I don't think Kennedy's a bad guy. We got to be careful how we lift people up, especially in politics. He continued. He goes, we get the government we deserve. No, we're not putting pastors in office. But when you put mortal cretins, he said mortal, it's actually, I think he meant moral cretins in office, don't expect the Washington you hate to improve itself. Now, I'm not sure he's a moral cretin. I don't know what's going on. He may have turned his life around. I don't know if that's fair, but I will say this. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Forget all the past transgressions. Forget everything you've heard. I don't even care. Is he a conservative?
No.
Now we're on to something. What about Tulsi Gabbard?
No.
Is she a conservative?
No.
All right, let's read this commercial. Let's get the commercial done. We're going to come back and talk about this. Why hero worship's a bad thing.
Resort.
All right, coming back here, hero worship. I want to be real clear about what we're going to talk about here. Nobody's perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. We all fall short. I am a chief among those. Jack, you're worse than me.
Man, way to pass judgment here.
The thing is that we still have to be seen as who we are, not as people aspire us to be.
Yeah.
And so here we are in a situation where we're picking, Trump's picking cabinet members. This is a pretty important thing. I mean, these cabinet members will sit there and I guess theoretically are supposed to advise the president of the United States. Now, he may not listen, I don't know, but they have a tremendous amount of power because they will head their respective agencies and organizations. And Kennedy, of course, and getting an appointment to Health and Human Services. It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a huge deal. Okay, stop. I'm going to get in trouble here. I realize that he shares our views on vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
Check. I realize that he believes, at least when it comes to medicines, that we should have personal autonomy. I like it. Check. I agree completely. That's about it. Hear me out. We have conservatives right now upholding him like the second coming.
I've seen it.
People I know and respect and love.
I've seen them. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Hear me out. Hear me out. He's not even a conservative.
No.
Let's go full circle now. At least let's have people in these positions that agree with us 90% of the time, as opposed to just 10% of the time. Moreover, and I'm not saying he shouldn't get it. I'm suggesting, to get this is going to blow your minds. What if I told you somewhere out there in this country is an educated, articulate, charismatic, handsome, conservative who believes the same way Kennedy does about vaccines?
He's out there.
Why isn't he getting the appointment? Look, I'm not anti-Kennedy. Now, I'm anti-Kennedy family sometimes, but I'm not anti-Kennedy. I'm pointing out that somewhere along the way, we've got good, strong conservatives that are losing the whole point here. Because if you do begin to water down your principles and your convictions for one issue, when he only agrees with you on that one issue. Let me give you a better example. There may be someone out there right now in our field, in the conservative movement, that is very much against reparations. I'm against reparations. Are you against reparations?
Absolutely.
I once got in big trouble saying something about reparations years ago. It was a tongue-in-cheek comment, but all I said was, if they pass reparations, I ain't paying taxes. That was a mistake in retrospect because the press ate me up about it, right?
I like the statement personally.
So the point is this. I'm against reparations. You're against reparations.
Yes.
Do you know who else was against reparations?
Who?
Barack Obama. Now, come on, work with me. Does that mean that because we agree with Barack Obama on one critical issue, that we should elect him?
No.
That we should appoint him? That we should put him in high positions of authority?
Absolutely not.
No, you see my point? And it's the same with Kennedy. Oh, you think Kennedy agrees with you on other issues, do you? Well, let's discuss the issues.
Let's do this.
Because I did the research. Abortion. He's very much pro-choice.
Yep.
Advocacy for public health funding for abortion. Pro-choice. I got in trouble one time saying we shouldn't be paying for birth control. He's for paying for birth control. That's a strike. Taxes. Taxes are a big part of who we are as Republicans. Yep. You think he supports higher income taxes or less?
Oh, he wants higher.
He wants higher. He's a progressive income tax guy. He wants taxes for environmental reasons. He wants higher corporate taxes. He wants your guns controlled. He backed off some of those comments when he was running.
Yeah.
But you can't back away from your public record for the last 40 years. He doesn't agree with us on anything except vaccines.
Yep.
And that's who you want to elevate. Whatever. But how does that serve the conservative movement? If we create a hero in a figure, whether it's a Kennedy or a Bush or an Obama or a Clinton, and we put those people in high authority simply because they agree with you on one or two issues, have you helped the conservative movement or have you hindered the long-term progress of the movement?
You've absolutely hindered it.
Since we're talking about hindering, Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah.
Look, I get it. I get it. She was once a Democrat. She switched parties. Does that make her a hero?
No, because we've seen time and time again these party switchers, how terrible they are once they go into the Republican Party.
Half the Mississippi GOP are party switchers, and those are the ones that keep stabbing us in the dadgum back. So she switched parties. That in and of itself does not mean she's qualified to be a cabinet position member. No. I realize they say, well, she's attractive, she's articulate. Who cares? I want conservatives in these positions. So, is she a conservative?
I don't think so.
Come on, don't kid yourselves, folks. We're talking about hero worship and how that blinds us. And you like her because she's a celebrity.
That's accurate.
You like her because she's a pretty girl. You like her because she happened to switch parties. And now all of a sudden we're supposed to embrace her. And that's fine. I guess she'll do fine in one of these positions. But keep asking yourself, is she a conservative?
Nope.
I've got her record.
Let's hear it. I want to hear it.
I'm just saying, here's what I'm suggesting. I'm not against her. I hope she does fine in the job she's been appointed to. I'm suggesting there's somebody else out there that's just as charismatic, that's just as attractive, that holds the exact same positions, except they're conservative.
Yep.
Why aren't they being appointed? I know. I'm not getting it. No, I get it. I'm speaking objectively. I'm not worshiping politicians. I want conservatives. I don't care if they're fat, ugly. I don't care. I want conservatives in these positions because we've seen how often we are betrayed by people like this.
Yeah, not just a flavor of the month, and that's what we're getting.
That's what we're getting. Our team won. Here's our flavor. Tulsi Gabbard, how do you think she feels about abortion, Giant?
Oh, she's for it.
Very much so. She has supported a woman's right to choose pro-choice positions her entire political career. She openly defended Roe versus Wade, emphasizing the importance of constitutional protections for reproductive rights. She wants to amend the Constitution to guarantee abortion. Focus on women's health. That's great. She wants family planning paid for, maternal health care paid for. Is that liberal or conservative?
That's pretty liberal.
You think she's for higher taxes or less taxes?
Oh, she wants those to go up.
Progressive income taxation, she's for. What about corporate tax cuts? She's against those. She wants to tax those mean corporations. Stop right there. Corporations. I realize liberals hate corporations, but corporations are little more than the ability of people to come together to make money. Now, when a corporation makes money, that's a good thing for everybody. Because when it makes the money, what does it do? It pays its employees, right?
Yep.
And it pays its owners, right?
Yep.
Now get this. When the corporation pays, that money's taxed, isn't it?
It is.
Why are we taxing it twice?
Because government.
It's the most anti-conservative position in the world, and she holds it. Women's health reproduction. She wants more money for birth control, more money for women's education and health care. She believes in common sense gun control. What is common sense gun control? Name one thing that's common sense about gun control.
I can't name it.
You can't name it because everywhere we've seen common sense gun control, it fails every time. We've seen common sense gun control in Chicago. It's got the highest death rate anywhere.
Yep. Common
sense gun control in D.C. and all these high crime areas. There's common sense gun control. Do you think criminals apply common sense when they acquire a gun illegally and then kill someone with it?
No.
She's for gun control. Environmental advocacy. She's leadership in this climate change policy positions, which would mean bigger government, more taxation. She opposes fossil fuel subsidies, which I assume she's against fracking and probably would like to shut down the fossil fuel industry. How many jobs is that? She supports green jobs. Again, more subsidies for green jobs and not for individual capitalistic expenditures. She's against corporations spending money in campaigns. That's interesting dichotomy. She wants to treat a corporation like a human when it comes to taxation, but not treat them like a human when it comes to speaking. Think about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I think you're getting my drift.
Oh, I do.
So criminal justice reform, which means she wants to let everybody out of jail for the most part. Same with Kennedy. He was the same thing on that. And support for, I don't want to keep talking about it.
What was that last
I don't want to talk about it. Bottom line is, she's done nothing remotely conservative her entire career, and only began to move toward Trump when she saw the writing on the wall. Mm-hmm. That reminds me of every single party switcher in every state in this country where they changed their parties but didn't change their stripes, and you wonder why we've been infiltrated. And again, I'm not against her. I'm against hero worship. If you want her, at least say it with a straight face. At least be honest about it. Say, well, she's a liberal, but don't try to recreate her into the mold of Barry Goldwater or Ronald Reagan, because that's not who she is. It's not who she's ever been. That doesn't mean she's a bad person. I'm just tired of our side falling for the same junk their side fell for all those years ago with Barack Obama.
Yeah.
And it's the same mindset.
You're 100% onto something here. I mean, and again, to your point, if you want to argue that you think either one of these are good for the position they've been nominated for, fine. I don't have a problem with that. I'm here to listen to that. I think Chris is here to listen to that. The issue here is the fact that you're trying to elevate them into this great person for the conservative movement. Because I've seen countless folks, Chris, hosting a roundtable right here in this studio one time, a couple of years ago, before the presidential election started. There was somebody, a strong conservative, who said, I think Tulsi Gabbard would be a great running mate for Donald Trump. And I'm like, no, that would be terrible.
And she's a heartbeat away from the presidency with all those liberal issues.
Yeah.
But she shares one issue in common, and we're supposed to elevate her. Yeah. You know what our problem is? We're celebrity obsessed.
True.
You take Kennedy as only in the picture because he's a Kennedy. If this were any other human with a last name of McGillicuddy, no one would even know who he is.
Yeah. Well,
but don't get me wrong. People are going to misconstrue this. I'm not against him. I'm not against Gabbard. I'm against us recreating them in our own image, recognizing that they're not. Here's why I say that, Jay. We've done it time and time again. And that's exactly what keeps the establishment in power. It's that mindset, because they roll in as old school Democrats. Yep. They come to our birthday parties. They send you nice letters in the mail. Your daddy went fishing with them back in the day. And they could have been Democrats their entire lives, but they switched parties and they're with us now. And so we have to elevate them. That's not the way I see the world. It's just not. Now, that may be harsh, but we've been betrayed by our own party more than I can count.
Well, Chris, to your point about the fact that we're obsessed with celebrity, you're 100% accurate. And if you want to see I can't think of a better example of that, is how both parties are fawning over the actor, former wrestler, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, because they've said the guy has political aspirations. I don't know that he'd be good for the job, but because he has a name, because he's popular, Republicans and Democrats both are trying to get him to be in their party.
It's just ridiculous. And you got Hulk Hogan tearing his shirt off at the Republican convention. It's like we're just forget ideas, forget concepts, forget policies. Let's just
personality.
It's a soap opera.
Yeah.
The whole dadgum thing's become a soap opera. You think otherwise, you think about not Republican, but congressional hearings. That's a soap opera designed for the gullible. And the point is they'll have these hearings, and then each congressman or senator gets to ask these hard-hitting questions. It's all nonsense. Nothing's going to come of it.
No.
But they get to give this speech and ask this hard-hitting question, and then their press people clip it, and they send it back home and they say, he's fighting for you. It's a charade or a charade. What movie was that? It's a joke. It really is, right? And so we all fall for it because we're mass consuming all this information, but none of it gets anything done. Now, I know I'm going full circle now. So many people are pointing right now and they're so angry. And that's fine. Be angry all you want. But just tell me where Kennedy's a conservative. You can write me, Senator McDaniel at gmail.com. Explain to me why Gabbard is a conservative. If you can do that, I'm on your side. But don't tell me you share one viewpoint with them when that makes them perfect. Yeah. Don't tell me that, because Barack Obama and I disagree about reparations. I mean, we agree about reparations, and I wouldn't trust him to walk my kid to school.
Never would think.
Anyway, I don't know why we're having these conversations.
Because we have to. Somebody has to bring this up, because there's so many folks out there that, again, are asleep at the wheel, that fall for the celebrity nonsense, that fall for, and that doesn't make them bad people at all.
No, it doesn't.
It's so easy, especially when you lead busy lives and you're not able to study as much, and you see a Facebook post talking about how one of these folks, well, they're up there doing this for you. They're up there. They're going to be great for you, and that you're not going to take the time. Most people, now, if you're watching this show, you might, but most people are not going to take the time to do any amount of research on these people. They're just going to see that post. They're going to see that one article, and they're going to run with it. And they're going to start to believe that these individuals are, in fact, conservatives, even though their track record tells you differently.
It's just embarrassing. It truly is. And I just received a text, and, I have good friends of mine in this state that are elevating him.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I still love them. But you got to have a better argument than we share one viewpoint with each other.
I agree.
Because when you elevate these people, it's no different than the other dozen or 1,000 moderate or silly liberal Republicans we've elevated because of celebrity, right? It's no different. I don't understand how these conservatives that have fought so hard against the establishment will then coalesce around celebrity and advance people that share none of their viewpoints with the exception of one. I mean, I know Garrett has a couple of good points on the military-industrial complex. Okay, I get it. I know Kennedy has some good points about personal autonomy. I get it. But they're not conservatives. So there, I've said my piece. Do as you will. I just can't believe this is happening with reasonable people. Because hero worship is the most dangerous thing in the world. Hero worship. Celebrity worship's even worse.
I agree.
I probably should have said that backwards. Celebrity worship's much more dangerous than hero worship.
Great.
One more thing I'll point out as a flawed individual. As I look at the world, we're supposed to treat everyone with respect and dignity. You're supposed to be kind.
Yeah. You're
supposed to be loving as best you can and forgiving as best you can. You're not supposed to worship anybody.
No.
I mean, there's one entity worth worshiping, Jesus.
Yeah.
Nobody else. And when we're open with ourselves, and sometimes we do worship these people, it really does take a toll on who we are. And I had a couple of points about that, and I'll get off this in a second because I know this is a wonderfully exciting topic. But have you ever considered how hero worship impacts viewpoints?
Oh, it definitely impacts viewpoints.
It erodes critical thinking. It undermines accountability. It encourages authoritarianism. It polarizes. It divides. It weakens our institutions. It allows them to manipulate us. It allows them to stifle progress and innovation. It even short-circuits some of the processes that are designed to protect our individual rights. All because they're celebrities, or all because our side won, or all because they share one thing in common with us. It's an incredibly dangerous approach. Nope. Better not to worship men or women.
Nope.
Stick to your principles. That's the most important thing. Speaking of principles, we're going to wrap up with this. We got to get rid of some of this federal government. And I don't mean some of it. I mean like almost all of it.
I agree. 100%.
And we have now an organization that's being formed to help us with that. Have you seen this Department of Government Efficiency?
I have.
Okay. They're onto something. I like this a lot. Now, as I understand it, the department is going to be an outside of government department, but it's going to have the goals, if you will, of tearing down waste, fraud, and abuse. I love the sound of that. This has been needed for an awfully long time. I don't know that it's good enough, because I think until that organization can actually impact the votes in Congress and maybe even get a constitutional amendment passed on federal spending, you may never be able to control future Congresses. I'll give you an example. Even if we have some success now cutting down some of this waste, fraud, and abuse using ridicule, what happens in 4 years? Does it just come back on steroids, right? So this is a good move. I like this, but I want to see it followed up by real action. So let's talk about some of this because it goes back years. You might remember Ron Paul, a man I respect dearly.
Yes.
Ron Paul was running for Congress in Texas, and he had a billboard up one time, and it showed this really fat Uncle Sam. Did you see it?
I remember it, yes.
And it said, "Let's put big government on a diet."
I love it.
And he did that a long, long time ago. And but the problem is government's never really on a diet.
No.
Then Reagan comes along and he reminds us of this. Now, granted, Reagan had to deal with Democrats in Congress, and Reagan himself overspit.
Yep.
Reagan made some mistakes. See my point? I love him. I don't worship him.
You can admit his flaws.
I can admit his flaws, and I can say that was wrong. He shouldn't have done X, Y. He shouldn't have cut those deals with the Democratic Congress. He shouldn't have passed that amnesty program that he passed. He shouldn't have allowed the debt to get as high as it did under his watch. He made some big mistakes. I still love him. You see the difference? You see accountability where it matters?
Yeah.
I can still love him, and he can be a hero, but I don't worship him. He still makes mistakes. Right? Does that make sense?
Still very flawed.
All right. Well, he wasn't flawed about this comment. He says that government, no program, no institution ever voluntarily decreases in its size. He says that once these programs are launched, they never disappear. And then he said this funny thing. He says, actually, a government bureau is the nearest thing to eternal life we'll ever see on this earth. He's right. Yeah. I had 16 years in government, and I can tell you, whenever you create a new function for government, it could be a new bureaucracy. It can be a new agency. Heck, it can be a new program that pays people, like Medicaid expansion, or it could be just new government jobs. Once those are created, they're eternal. And so people wonder why it is I was so adamant about fighting against growth. Well, I was following Reagan's advice here. Because think about it. When was the last time we pared down the size and scope of the federal government?
I can't name it.
I can't either. The data is really, really shocking. I've got some data here somewhere, and I'm going to give you some of these expenditures that are going to make you cry at night. But look at this data here. If I can find it in a short, concise time period. Otherwise, I'm making these numbers up. I found it. So get this. Since 1913, now we all know what happened in 13. The imperialist president of Woodrow Wilson, right? Yeah. So Wilson comes along, and the United States federal government goes completely berserk in 1913. Income tax passed, Federal Reserve passed, and so on and so forth. They even took away the legislature's ability to elect senators. It used to be that was done by states in the legislative branches, by the legislature of a state, and they made it a popular vote, which eroded the concept, which the idea was to empower states to maintain some control over that federal apparatus.
Yeah.
You may say, well, the popular vote's the right idea. Well, it may sound like it's the right idea, but it really has worked the wrong way for us, right? So 1913, at that stage, the federal government was 2.5% of our economy. Did you know that?
I did not.
It's 24% of our economy now. Yeah. Hey, consider, we're a capitalist country. We believe in free markets. 24% of the economy is run by the federal government. Federal mandatory spending has grown from 3% of the budget in 1913 to 73% of the budget and growing daily. We now spend more money on servicing the national debt. That's just paying the interest than we do on the entire military budget. Come on now. You understand what that means, right? It's like, when I talk about interest, like when you have a credit card bill and you have that interest note that comes with it, and you have to pay that much more.
Yeah.
That much more for the feds is more than our entire military budget. We're $36 trillion in debt, no end in sight, adding roughly $1 trillion each year now. So yeah, what Reagan said was accurate. These programs aren't going away. So we have this new idea, right? And I love it. The idea is to walk in there and to find ways to present through ridicule or whatever. Maybe he can use X in a very powerful way here to say, look, this is the waste we found. Now, it's silly. Let's stop it. What are some of the silly things? Some of this stuff is outrageous. So Rand Paul has been known to be this budget hawk for years. Did you hear that?
I did hear that.
Is that Lindsey Graham trying to get back in this building?
It might be.
He's been knocking on the doors for some time now.
I think Mitch McConnell may have finally found you.
Well, I wish him the best. I wish him the best. So anyway, they start looking. Rand Paul did years ago at these programs that are a part of this vast, wasteful federal bureaucracy. And see, there's Lindsey again.
I hear it.
First, he's trying to knock on the doors. Now he's spitting at you.
He's trying to contaminate us. That was germs.
One of the programs they found. What if I ask you a serious question? Anybody in this room? Does anybody seriously want to know what makes a sunfish more aggressive?
I'm good.
Have you ever sit there at night pondering the universe and say, by God, if I could only understand why sunfish get mad? Well, the government wants to know because they spent $100,000, and the test was this: is it gin or tequila? I'm serious. I didn't make this up. They literally tested on sunfish what made them more angry, gin or tequila. And I'm just wondering why whiskey was left out, because clearly that's what makes Southerners most angry.
Yes.
That's what makes the Irish most angry. Yeah. It gets worse. The U.S. government also spent $1 million to determine whether or not cocaine makes Japanese quails more sexually promiscuous.
This is one you've brought up before.
First of all, what's a Japanese quail?
That's what I want. Great question.
I mean, I didn't know we separated quail. I mean, anyway, it's a Japanese quail. And the last thing on my mind is whether or not they're sexually promiscuous when it comes to cocaine. First of all, that's an overstatement. A bottle of wine to get it done, right? That's what really makes the quail upset. But cocaine?
Yeah.
This is your federal government spending your money to discover these scientific breakthroughs. Here's another one. Have you ever seen Neil Armstrong when he landed on the moon?
Yeah.
You remember that? You looked at me like, well, who's Neil Armstrong?
No, I didn't.
You looked at me like, what's the moon? You remember when he landed on the moon, right?
I wasn't born yet,
sure,
but I've seen the videos.
Whatever, but you've seen the videos. They're black and white, right?
Yes.
I'm sure that half of our base thinks the moon landing was staged. So we probably should be careful here. But what did he say when he took that last step? What did he say?
One small step for man.
Yeah, that's pretty good, Jack. You clearly have seen it.
I told you.
Well, there seems to be a disagreement as to exactly what he said. So our government tried to get to the bottom of it. The one side of the equation says he said one small step for man, and the other side says no, it was one small step for a man. Our government spent $750,000 studying that and came up with an inconclusive answer.
Who gave a damn?
Exactly. But this is your taxpayer dollars, man. All right, it gets better. It gets better. Why did we spend $2 million on a construction of a kelp and shellfish nursery in Maine? Does Maine need a nursery for seafood?
Apparently so. And we're supposed to pay for it, I guess.
We spent $1.5 million to encourage video gaming in New York. I'm gonna tell you, my sons have never gotten paid a dime, and they'll tell you they will encourage video gaming all day. We spent $388. Well, part of this. Wait a minute, $1.5 million. No, we should have. That's what. That's better. We should have spent money to discourage kids from playing video games. That'd have been a better result.
Get them outside.
But do you see this moon battery? And this is what we've seen for the last 50 years with this federal government. Now, if Musk and his friends over at the Department of Governmental Efficiency can find ways to point to these programs and demonstrate ridicule, maybe somebody in Congress will say something, but I'm not so sure. And let me tell you why. Because the same nitwits that are trying to figure out why sunfish are being upset, or tequila or gin or whatever the case may be, they also spend a fortune through FEMA on various emergency grant operations. And I don't mean important things like CB radios. Have you been watching these, what do you call these things, emergency operation centers pop up everywhere? Have you been seeing that?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Since fiscal year 2008, your Congress has added 2,143 earmarks, costing taxpayers $1.8 billion for emergency operation centers. Isn't that crazy?
It's insane. We don't have the money. But let's just keep spending like we do.
Anyway, we've said enough. The point is that I thank God that somebody is finally looking at the federal government as the problem it always has been. It's irresponsible. It has no plan for responsibility. It has no long-term plan for demonstrating results despite all this money being spent. I want you to consider, in corporate America, you have to have a plan. And if you don't show how expenditures of the money creates results, what happens? You get axed. The feds don't do that. One example, we're going to wrap it up. The Federal Department of Education is the new kicking, stump right now, because we've been talking about getting rid of that for years. Ask yourself this: has the Federal Department of Education improved educational outcomes over the last 50 years?
Not even slightly.
Then why is it still there? If not a bureaucrat's dream, why is it still there if not just Congress making the wrong decisions as they spend your money? And here's why government can't spend your money better than you can. It's really simple. When corporations or even you spend your money, there's almost always a profit motive. Have you thought about that? You spend it based on a couple of things. You want to acquire something, or you want to grow something. But the bottom line is, it's your money. And so you have a close association with your money, and you want to spend it responsibly. Congress doesn't have any of those restrictions,
no.
Psychologically speaking. All they care about is re-election. So they're going to spend it in the most haphazard, silly ways imaginable, so long as it translates to votes. And it does translate to votes. The problem with that is that every little tiny congressman is doing that. It magnifies into an out-of-control, irresponsible spending nightmare. And that's why we're $36 trillion in debt. And with that said, there's not another issue on this planet more dangerous to the United States government and its survivability than the debt. And we ignore it. We pretend it doesn't happen. We'll get to that next show. Jack, I've enjoyed it. We've been doing this a while now. We've had a good time. I hope people understand what we're saying. I hope they don't take it all the wrong way. I hope they think as opposed to just act. I hope they're reasoned as opposed to just emotional, because that's the very things we blame the Democrats on all those years. And here we are falling right into those traps. We have a government to save, and President Trump is going to do a good job, I believe that, in making the right calls down the stretch. But it starts with the federal government. Is it going to grow or is it going to shrink? Hopefully, with the Department of Governmental Efficiency, we find ways to shrink it. Jack, as always, thank you for being here. This has been Chris McDaniel's America on the Midnight Ride, your home of the anti-establishment movement in this country. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next time.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0.
Wow, it's so soft and smooth.
It's cool to the touch. How did you do that?
Well, we took My Pillow's patented fill and combined it with this new technology that we didn't have back then when I invented My Pillow to bring you the best pillow in history, My Pillow 2.0. Just like all of you, I never imagined that My Pillow could get any better. That's why I haven't changed it in nearly 20 years. Then I heard about a revolutionary new technology, and I knew I had to bring it to you all. MyPillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of MyPillow.
The MyPillow 2.0 is cooler and softer than the last MyPillow. It is so comfortable to sleep on at night. I look forward to going to bed, and I wake up well rested in the morning.
Sleep is all about temperature and height. MyPillow 2.0's patented adjustable fill is going to give you the exact individual support you need from your head to your bed. And now here's where it gets even better. We've all experienced those temperature-related sleep interruptions where you get too hot, you toss and turn, you flip your pillow over to the cool side. Well, all that's gone with my brand new MyPillow 2.0 cooling fabric that's made with temperature-regulating thread.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit mypillow.com.